Okay, wrap up with your writing. All right, we're going to do one more writing exercise and then take a short break after that. But before we do that, I'll just tell you a secret. You know, many of us who teach creative writing use this kind of what we call generative writing workshops because they're quite useful. Sometimes we do it around a theme, like we'll focus on plot, or we'll focus on character, or something like that. Or we'll focus on writing about an incident or a place. But I really, when I first sort of developed generative workshops myself for teaching, I was really borrowing from a much more basic source, my primary school English classroom. When I was a kid, I went to school here in Hong Kong in a local primary and secondary school, a girls' school, and once a week in English class, beginning from about primary 2 or 3, we used to have to write an essay in class on any, we were often, sometimes we were given a topic, but quite often we were just told to write anything we wanted. And that's where I wrote my very first short story. And I thought, this is fun. And I just kept going, because it was quite easy to do. And I don't think that without classes like that, I would ever have realized I could be a writer, because after that, I did it on my own, because I realized I could. But only about, I don't know, 8 or 9, and the teacher tells you, write this, so you do it, So in Chinese, it's 作文, and that was the only Chinese class I was good in. It's the only one I liked. I hated every other Chinese class I had to do because my vocabulary was not so good. But it was funny, when I wrote in Chinese, suddenly I wanted and got to use vocabulary. My language became better because I wanted to write something. My written Chinese is pretty bad. I could not really write adequately in Chinese at all. But at the time I was studying Chinese. So it reminds me of the power of language, what Amy Tan said earlier about language. My Chinese was pretty simple and basic because I really hadn't grown up in a Cantonese speaking household, so I didn't have the kind of vocabulary that kids who were native speakers of Chinese or Cantonese. I could speak it almost like a native speaker, but I really didn't have that literacy level. But when it came to writing, I wanted to do it. So suddenly I go learn some vocabulary and I didn't use words. And I think it's the same for people who are writing in any language that isn't their own. You own the language. You use all the Englishes that you have at your disposal. Nabokov was famous for using words that nobody has ever heard of. I mean, reading a Nabokov novel, and I love Nabokov. I read a lot of his work, and I reread and I reread and I reread his work because I think he is just an amazing writer. But even years later, when I go back to Lolita or Pinyin or any of his novels, I am still looking up words in the dictionary. So it's very good with the Kindle because now you just go, definition. English was not his first language. It was Russian. He was a Russian writer. So he was borrowing and he was learning all this vocabulary. Conrad did the same. He was a Polish native speaker, and he wrote in English also. So I think it's quite interesting how if you're approaching another language, you have a way of looking at the language at your disposal that maybe the native speaker would not think of doing. Certainly Nabokov made it the kind of signature of his own. Okay, so one last writing exercise. Now, you're going to write an opening of a narrative about any subject you're interested in, but you have to do it in either fiction or creative nonfiction. And you should name the subgenre or form you've chosen to use. I'm going to try to write a little longer now, about as much as 250 words if you can, or more. You always do more, but try not to do less than 200. And you have 10 minutes to do that. Okay? So, go.
Excuse me. Before I proceed the exercise, I would like to identify what the short and option will be for me to choose or describe?
Well, you know what we were talking about earlier, I mean, if you want to write fiction, for example,
Yeah.
you could say, I'm writing a short story, or I'm going to try to write the beginning of a novel, you know, more ambitious. Or I want to write a horror story or a romance story. For nonfiction, you could say, I want to write memoir, like a personal story, or I want to write like a biography about somebody, or it could be like a more lyric kind of essay or meditative kind of essay. It could be a satiric one, you know, so these are just among the things you could think about. Don't worry too much about very, you know, very formal definitions, just what you understand about writing narrative, because we're not, you know, we're not trying to turn you all into novelists of the future or anything.
Just a rough categorization.
Yes, just a rough categorization for yourself as you try to write your piece of prose and try to identify what it is.